Hello everyone, my name's Austin Palmer. I'm the designer of the game Luna VM, a 9-card chase, and I'm here today with a instructional and a playthrough video. As you might have guessed, Luna VM is a 9-card game. It's played entirely in hand, which means you don't need a table, and it is a sort of solitaire deduction and hidden movement game. You're a detective trying to track down the titular thief Luna VM as they move around the city, and you have 9 turns to gather clues about their movement and their location. And if you can capture them by the end of the 9th turn, you win. Otherwise, they escape. Two things before I get started. First, you might notice these cards are a little plain. They're just black and white icons with lettering in the background. I would highly recommend, if you try this game, you print out artist Kevin Pavale's full color cards. They're much better, much more thematic. It gives you the feel of actually walking around a city gathering clues. The only reason I'm using these for this playthrough is because the icons are much bigger, so they show up a little better on camera. Secondly, this game has 12 sort of fixed, discrete scenarios, and each scenario has kind of a fixed solution. So in the course of this playthrough, we will be spoiling, in a sense, the solution for this scenario here. If you don't want one of those scenarios to be spoiled, then you can just watch sort of the rules overview, and then once we get started, you might want to turn off the video. They're spoiled in the sense that once you know the solution, you know the solution. You will probably forget them if you play through, 5 scenarios. You'll probably forget the first one by then, but it can still be frustrating that you're going to know what's coming if you play this scenario. So let's begin. To set up the game, first you'll choose a scenario. Like I said, they're denoted by these little icons in the upper left corner of these spaces. Like I said, there's 12 scenarios, and the cards are double-sided. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 scenarios. You can choose it randomly. You can just choose one you haven't done before. It doesn't really matter, except that if you've done one recently, you'll probably know what the solution is. Once you've chosen a scenario icon, you're going to organize the cards in descending order based on that icon. So the icon will be in the same space every time, and you're just going to order it from 1 to 9. So we've done this here. Try to look at the cards as little as possible, and then sort of stack them in the deck and hold it in your hand. Each card is broken up into 9 spaces, representing sort of the map of the city you're moving around in. They're lettered A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and each space will have maybe blank, or it might have a big sort of icon in the middle. That'll be your clue for that location. We'll get to the types of clues later. And they will have their scenario icon and number in the upper left. These only matter for setup. Once you've set up the game, you don't really need to pay attention to these, and you can ignore anything on the top right, and bottom left. We'll get to that later. So once you've set up the game, you will start in this location, and Luna VM will also start in a location at the start of the game. So we don't know their location, but sort of for the purposes of illustration, let's say if we start at A, let's say they start at I. And each turn, you're going to have 9 turns, and each turn is going to have 4 steps. The first step is that Luna VM moves. There's nothing you really have to resolve here, but just know that if they start at a location, at this step, they're going to move from their location to a different location. And there's a few rules for them. They can't move anywhere they want. So first, they can only move 1 space, and it has to be to an adjacent space. So if they started here, they could only move to H or F. They can't move diagonally, and they can't wrap around. Also, if at all possible, Luna VM will choose a space they haven't been to before. So let's say they move to H, then to G, then to D, E, F. The only place they could move to from there is C, because they would never choose I unless they had to, because they've already been there. And then finally, no matter what happens, they will never double back on themselves. So if they have to choose a spot that they've already been to before, they won't choose the spot they were just at. So they will never go, say, C to B and then B to C. And for some terminology that I might use later on in the video, Luna VM's hideout is the location they moved to that turn. So if they started at I and then on the first turn moved to H, their hideout would be H. And their trail for a turn is every location they've been to up and including that current turn. So on the first turn, if they move from I to H, their trail would be I and H. Right, so they will move. That'll be the first step. The second step will be resolving the clue of the space you're at. So remember, we start here and we will resolve this clue. You'll only do this for the first 5 turns. You only get 5 clues, and then the rest of the other 4 turns are just trying to narrow down where Le Nouveau is and capture them. And to resolve a clue, you just look at the clue of the space you're in. If it's blank, you don't get any information for that turn. But otherwise, you will get a clue regarding either Le Nouveau's location or their movement for that turn. And there are 5 types of clues, and we'll go over them now. So these arrows, these sort of pointing fingers, they are a reported movement. They tell you, they'll give you 2 hands showing the two directions that Le Nouveau might have moved. So in this case, we know that Le Nouveau, we don't know where they started, and we don't know exactly where they moved, but we know that they either moved up or they moved right. A last reported location clue is sort of this GPS icon here, and it will tell you, if you're on this space, the location of Le Nouveau's hideout exactly 2 turns ago. So you would never get this on the first turn, but let's say you got this on the second turn, you would know that 2 turns ago, Le Nouveau was in location E. So for instance, if they started at E, moved to H, and then to G, you could be on this space and get this clue because 2 turns ago they were at E. A rumor, this sort of phone here, gives you 3 locations, one of which will be Le Nouveau's current hideout. So if you were here resolving this clue, you would know Le Nouveau's either at C, D, or G. A search is sort of the opposite of that. It gives you 3 locations that Le Nouveau definitely isn't. And finally, this triangulation gives you how many steps Le Nouveau is from this location. So if you were on this location with a triangulation 2, you would know Le Nouveau is exactly 2 steps away from you. So either 1, 2, G, I, C, or A. And those are the 5 kinds of clues. You might get the same kind multiple turns. You might get different kinds. You might get no clue depending on where you move. But those are the 5 types of clue. And in future turns, and we'll go over this on the second turn, in future turns, these clues might not be true, but the first turn, the clue you resolve is always accurate. So for our game, we'll know, starting here, we know Le Nouveau either moved up or they moved to the right, which means the only thing we really know is that, and we can narrow down that, for instance, they didn't start at C, because if they started at C, they couldn't possibly move up or to the right, and they couldn't currently be at G, because there's no way to move up or to the right and end at G. So they could be in any of these other 8 squares, but they didn't start here, they currently aren't here, and we know that they moved up or they moved right. But that's really all we know, though, so we'll have to get some more information. Once we resolve the clue for our location, you must move unless you're on the 5th turn or later. So if you still have clues to receive, you have to move. You can move 1 space orthogonally, just like Le Nouveau, but you can cross over your path if you want to. And so let's say we want to move from A to D. In order to do that, you just say, okay, I'm moving from A to D, and then you move this card to the back. And so this will be your location for next turn. We don't have to look at this yet because we're not at the next turn, but here's where we will be for next turn. The final step of the turn, and this is always optional, is you may confront Le Nouveau. If you think that you are at their location, then you will confront them. And to confront them, you will remember your location, which is D, flip the deck, and look at the bottom left of the location, so D. Our scenario icon's on the bottom right, but you're only looking at the bottom left, trying to not look at any of the other locations. And if your scenario icon is in this location, then you've successfully cornered them and you win the game. So if we had, on the first turn, flipped this at D and seen this icon here, we would have immediately won the game. It would have been entirely completely luck-based because we would have no idea where they were, but we would have won. That would have been pretty nice. But in the more likely event that you don't corner them, you sort of get a demerit. You'll never lose by guessing wrongly, but the more incorrect guesses you have at the game, the lower your score will be. So you want to only confront them when you're pretty sure you know that you're at their location. In this case, we confronted Le Nouveau. They were not at this location, so we have not won the game yet. So we flip back, and we move on to the next turn. So once again, we're at the second turn, so Le Nouveau will move. Again, we have no idea where they are, we have no idea where they moved, but we know they've moved twice at this point. And then we will resolve this clue here. Now, I mentioned that these clues might not be true, and that's because starting on the second turn onward, the clue you receive will only be true if Le Nouveau's trail includes that space. Otherwise, it will be false. but you don't necessarily know if it's true or false until you figure out more about what Lanuvium's possible paths could be. So we know that on the first turn they moved up or to the right, and on the second turn, the clue we're given is that Lanuvium either moved up or they moved down. Now, this is only true if Lanuvium was on this space or is currently on this space. So, for instance, if they had started at G, moved to D, and then say moved to A, then this clue would be true because they already visited D. Otherwise, this clue is false. So let's say Lanuvium started here, moved up, and then moved to the left. They have never visited this space before, so this clue would actually be false. And you can tell that if they moved up and to the left, clearly that clue is not true. They didn't move up or down, they moved to the left. But like I said, at this moment, we don't know whether or not this clue is correct or not. But we can narrow down a few paths that Lanuvium couldn't take. For instance, they couldn't have started here, moved up, and then to the right, because that would mean this clue should be true, but isn't, because they didn't move up or down, they moved to the right. So we can say eliminate this path. We can eliminate, say, this path, HEB, because this clue shouldn't be true, but is. Lanuvium never visited this space, which means this clue can't be true, but the clue would have been true because they still moved upwards. You can kind of eliminate a lot of possibilities that way by saying, okay, if Lanuvium visited this spot, it has to be true. So they definitely moved up or down. If they haven't visited this space yet, they definitely didn't move up or down, which means they had to have moved left or right. So you're being given some information, you just don't know what information it is until you do a better job narrowing down. So all we know right now is Lanuvium moved up or right the first turn, and then they either moved up or down and they visited this space, or they haven't visited this space and they moved left or right. So keep that in mind. But they've moved, we resolve this clue, and then we move again. Let's say we move down to G. So we'll move this down to G here, and this is our new location. We won't bother confronting Lanuvium because we have no idea where they are. But that said, I'd say at this point, if you don't want the scenario to be spoiled, you can probably close the video. All these are kind of all the rules. There's some minor timing considerations of when you can stop moving and when you can stop getting a clue at about the fifth turn. But other than that, we will be kind of spoiling the scenario by going through the deduction and hopefully capturing Lanuvium. So otherwise, we're here, and this is the third turn. So Lanuvium has moved for a third time, we don't know where, and this is the clue we're given. It's a search, meaning they are not at E, they are not at E, they are not at A, they are not at E, and they are not at F. And again, this is only true if Lanuvium has been here before. Otherwise, it's not true. So let's go through some options of what that could mean. For example, previously we had said they could have started at G, then D, then A, because that would have made all the previous clues earlier. True. But then from this point, they would have had to have moved to B, because they can't move backwards. They would have moved to B because it's a space they haven't been to before. And that would mean that they're not in A, E, or F. So this path here, G, D, A, B, is possible, because if they started here, this clue would be true, and it would be true if they were here right now, which is not at a space that is A, E, or F. Conversely, let's say they moved H. Sorry, I'm trying to come up with an example that would not be true at this point. Okay, so let's say, no. Okay, so let's say they started at E. No, that one wrong. Okay, let's say they started at D, moved to E, moved to B, and then moved to A. So for the previous clues, this would be plausible, right? They moved right, which is our first clue. They moved up, which agrees with our second clue, because that second clue would have been true because they visited D, and they moved up or down, so that's fine. But if they had moved to A, actually that does work, because this clue would have to be false, which means they would have to be in A. So this path, for instance, D, E, B, A, is plausible. So this is a possible path. Another plausible path would be, say, E, H, G, D. No, okay, there's one. So G, E, H, G, D would actually be possible. Never mind. So I'm having trouble visualizing my point, but the point is there are possible routes that could have been plausible that wouldn't be plausible because of this clue. But actually, this doesn't necessarily give us a lot of extra information because, as you can see, all the routes I'm tracing that would have been plausible are still plausible based on this clue. So this clue was not that helpful for us. But let's try to remember this clue in case it becomes handy later on. So we know in the first turn they moved up or right. In the second turn, they might have moved up or down if they had already visited D, or they moved left or right. And in the third clue, if they were already here at some point, they were not at A, E, or F. Otherwise, they definitely were on A, E, or F. This game can have a bit of a memory element. You have to remember the 5 clues and sort of go through all the permutations. If you don't like that, you're more than welcome to use a sheet of paper, pen and paper to sort of jot down your notes and figure out the deductions that way. If you do it sort of completely in hand without a table or pen and paper, you will have to sort of remember these clues on the fly. So Luna moved, we resolved our clue. We get to move again. Let's move to H. Let's just keep moving in different directions. Move to H, move this card over. And if we wanted to, we could confront Luna VM, but we really have no idea where they are, so we will not. And this is the 4th turn. And it sort of seems like we made a mistake, right? H has nothing in it. We were given no clues. But actually, this is somewhat helpful because if you get an empty space, like no clue, it's a guarantee that Lanuvium never visited this space before. So, for instance, I'd mentioned a path HEBA, which would have been feasible before, or no, it wouldn't be feasible. Let's say IFE. Let's say GHIF. No, that wouldn't have worked out. This is hard to explain while I'm filming. Essentially, so let's try to go through things one at a time. Possible routes that Lanuvium could or couldn't have taken. So if they'd started at G, let's look at what they could have gone. First move would have been D or H. Nothing's narrowed down there. If they'd gone to D, we know that because of the second clue, they had to go to A. So their route would have had to go this way. And then for the third clue, we know that they couldn't be at A, E, or F, so they could have moved here. So until we saw this clue, we know that their route could have been this, G, D, A, B, and then all we know is they were never at H, so they could have gone to E or they could have gone to C. So starting at G, we could have gone here or we could have gone this way. But we could never have gone towards H, because at that point, they would have visited H, so we would have had some clue here. We don't have a clue here, so we know Lanuvium never visited H and is not currently on H. So we know that, say, this path here, like this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, can't be true because they would have visited H and that's not right. So we've narrowed down any path that starts here and then moves towards H. Similarly, from an earlier clue, we can say with certainty that G didn't go up to D and then to E, because that would have violated the second clue being up, down, which would have been true if they had visited D. So if they started at G, and we don't know that they did, they would have either had to go G, D, A, B, E, or G, D, A, B, C. And you can sort of do this similar process for other locations. For instance, let's say they had started at A, which is where we started. If they had gone to D, they couldn't have gone to D because their first movement was right or up. So they would have had to gone A to B. And then because they wouldn't ever be visiting D by the second turn, they would have had to have gone right. So their route would have had to take them A, B, C. Their next move would have had to have taken them to F. And that fits with the clues because they wouldn't have visited G. And G's clue was not A, not E, not F. So they would have been in F, so that would have been an accurate clue. So they could have gone A to B, B to C, C to F. And then they could have gone to either location this way because the only clue we've gotten this turn is that they've never visited H. So, for instance, paths like G, D, A, B, E, that's possible. G, D, A, B, C is possible with the clues. A, B, C, F, E is possible. A, B, C, F, I is possible. And there's a lot of other possible ones, but we've at least narrowed down, say, G, H, anything. That's not possible. Similarly, if they started at D, they couldn't have moved to A because on the second turn they would have had to have moved right. But on the second clue, and this is technically not allowed, but I'm just going to show. On the second clue, we learned that if they visited D, they went up or down. But for that to have happened on the second turn, they couldn't have visited A from D because they would have been forced to go right to B. So we know, for instance, D, A, B or anything is not right. So in order to have started at D, they would have had to have moved to E. And then they would have either have had to move to B or H. But they couldn't have moved to H because we know they haven't visited H. And that's a guaranteed sort of true thing. If you don't get a clue, they were never there. So we know if they started at D, they had to have gone D, then to B. Then this clue would have had to have been false on the third turn, which was that they weren't A, E, or F. So it would have been D, E, B, A. And then their only move at that point would have been D. So if they started at D, they would have to be at, they would have to be at D again because they couldn't have gone this way on turn 2. They couldn't have gone this way ever because then they would have had a clue at H. They couldn't have gone, and they would have had to have gone this way. Then they would have had to have gone this way. And then the only other route for them is this way, which means that's 1, 2, 3, 4, which means if that's correct, the next turn they will be here. So D, E, B, A, D. So the next turn they would have to move to G because it's a space they've never been before. So we've narrowed some things down, right? We know certain things couldn't have been done. We know certain things are more possible. And we know if they had started at certain places, they couldn't have been, we know certain places they would have to be. So with all that out of the way, let's move. So let's go on our gut that they did move D, E, B, A, D. So their next move is going to be here. Remember, they're still here right now, so we shouldn't confront them right now. But we'll move back to G. So D, E, B, A, D. That's our sort of assumed guess, remembering all the clues, because this might not be true. There's other plausible options. But D, E, B, A, D, let's assume they're going to go here next turn. We'll move to G. So flip this way. We move to G. Again, we won't confront the new VM because we think they're going to be here next turn. But clearly we're wrong. We're on the last turn. Well, not the last turn, the 5th turn. This is the last turn we get any clues. And once again, we've received no clues, which means G was never visited and is currently not visited by the new VM, which means they can't be here. If they were here, we would have some kind of clue, which would have maybe tipped us off that they were here, but they're not here. So we know that this path, D, E, B, A, D, G, is wrong. It couldn't have happened. So let's sort of re-examine our previous clues and see if any of them tell us something. So we know Lanuvium moved, up or right on the first turn. We know they never visited H or G. And so we know that that clue we got on turn 3 at G has to be false. So we know that on turn 3, again, you shouldn't be doing this, but you can if you want to. But on turn 3, the clue we resolved was that they weren't at A, E, or F. And we know this has to be false because they never visited they never visited G. So this clue has to be false, which means on the third turn, they were definitely at A, E, or F. That's actually pretty huge because we can narrow down a lot of options that way. So for instance, if they started at D, well, we know they couldn't have started at D because all the options wouldn't be impossible. They couldn't have started at G because we know they never were at G. Let's look at A. If they started at A, they would have had to go this way. We know they would have had to go this way from previous clues. They would have had to go this way. And that actually fits because that would mean they were on F, which fits with the false clue we got on turn 3. So that works. And then on their 4th turn, if they had moved this way, that would still work because they would have never visited H by then. And they would have had to have gone this way. So the path A, B, C, F, I, and then currently H, that works. Or by the same token, A, B, C, F, E, D, that also works. So if they'd started at A, they could either be at D or I. Let's look at B. Where could they have gone from B? So if they'd started at B, the only place they could have gone, based on our first clue, is right. Because remember, our first clue is that they moved up or to the right. So B would have had to have gone this way, and then by the rules of how Lanuvium moves, they would have had to have gone down. But this can't be right because our second clue was that La Novia moved up or down, but this has to be false because by that root, they would have never been here. So that root can't have happened. So we know if they didn't start at B, we can eliminate that. Right now we can eliminate they didn't start at B, didn't start at D because we eliminated all the options, didn't start at G, and didn't start at H. At this point, we should probably try to narrow down everything because we're on the last turn. We're not getting any more clues. So this is kind of all we have other than making, if we make a guess and they're not there, then we'll know that they're not there currently. So let's narrow everything down and see if we can figure out exactly where they are. So C, we know they couldn't have started there because they wouldn't have been able to move up or right. D, we already eliminated. E, if E had started and gone to B, then they could have gone to A or to C, because either way that would have followed from the second clue. And then they either would have gone to D or they would have gone to F. But they couldn't have gone here because then that would have agreed with this clue on turn 3. Remember, turn 3, we got a clue. And this clue has to be false because we know they never visited G up to this point. So we know they couldn't have gone this way, so they would have had to have gone this way. E, B, C, F. And then because the only other option would have been I, they would have had to have gone E, B, C, F, I, H. And that actually works with the clues. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They would be at H. And that actually means that if they had gone A, B, C, F, I, H, they would be there as well. So we currently have 3 possible paths. This way, or this way. And the important thing is it doesn't really matter if you know their exact path. It only matters if you know where they are. So right now, 2 possible paths put La Novia right here at this very moment. And one of them puts them right here at this very moment. So we're starting to close in. So we've gone through these. F, if F had started here, they would have had to have gone to, or if La Novia had started at F, they would have had to go to C. Then they would have had to go to B because of their movement rules, and that would fit. Then they would have gone to either A or E, which works because that would have aligned with the false clue here. So they could have gone here, 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 or here, here, here. But either way, they then could have gone to D or H because, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, either way, they would have had to have gone to D because if they had started F, C, B, E, they couldn't have gone to H because remember on the 4th turn, that's where we were. And we got a clue that they were never at H. So they couldn't have gone here. So the only possibility would have been F, C, B, A, D, or F, C, B, E, D. And from that point, either they couldn't have gone to G because, again, we're on the 5th turn, we're at G, we know they never went there. So they couldn't have gone to G. So the only possible path from there is F, C, B, E, D, A. And that's plausible. That's definitely a possibility. F, C, B, that would fit. E, that works. And then there, that works. And that works. So that's definitely possible. And, okay, and then we know they couldn't have started here. No, they couldn't have started here. And then I, they would have had to have gone here. Then they would have had to have gone here based on the clues. But then at this point, anywhere they go would have taken them to either B or D, which wouldn't have aligned with the clue we received on turn 3. We know this is false. We know they had to have been at A, E, or F on turn 3. So we've narrowed down to, I think, 4 routes at this point. They could have either gone A, B, C, F, E, D, so they might be here. A, B, C, F, I, H, so they might be here. E, B, C, F, I, H, so they could be here. That's 2 out of 3. And then the 4th one is F, C, B, E, D, A. So they could have sort of snaked their way around here, and they could be here. If they're here, that's kind of a problem for us because we're down here, and we know their next turn will take them here, but we don't know where else they would go. They would either go here and then here, or they could go here and then here, and we don't get any more clues after this. But 2 out of those 4 possible routes we looked at end them right here at H. So at this point, movement's optional because you're not going to get any more clues, so the movement doesn't matter. But we're going to choose to move. There's about a 50% chance Lanuvium's here because 2 out of the 4 routes we determined place them right here, right now. So we'll move here, and we'll slide that card to the back, and we will check to see if they are here. So we'll flip, again, try to only look at this location. And we're wrong. Lanuvium's not here, which sucks because that means we've made 2 wrong guesses now. But it's good because it means we've narrowed down between one of 2 options. So we only have 2 possible options now, but we should flip over and see what our new options are. So we now know they only have 2 possible paths. A, B, C, F, E, D, and then G for the 6th turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or they started at F, F, C, B, E, D, A, and then they would have had to go to B because they can't backtrack. So they're either at B or they're at G. So like I said, it's going to be hard to catch them here because if they're here, then they could go here and then anywhere, or they could go here and then here. So if they're here, we're not going to catch them unless we're lucky. So we'll have to go here, and we'll hope that they're at this location. So we don't get a clue because it's the 6th turn. We could stay if we wanted to, but we don't. So we'll move to location G, and then we will try to confront them. So remember, our hope is that based on our deduction, Lanuvium is either here, 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 here. Well, their path is starting here, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, turn 6. So we're hoping they're right here. So we'll flip, and we got them. Lanuvium was captured. We caught them directly at location G on turn 6, and we have won the game. So there's a chart in the rules that sort of gives you a score based on how many incorrect guesses you made. Let me look that up right now. If they evaded you twice, you are a promising private eye. Obviously, the best is to get them on the very first try. That's pretty tough because, as you saw, we were left with a few possible options for where they were by the end of the 5th turn. And then the more evasions they get, the worse you're considered as a detective. So yeah, that's Lanuvium. Again, this upper right and bottom right, these icons are for sort of little expansion variants that I added. I'm not going to go over those now because this video is 30 minutes long already. But that's how you play Lanuvium. You're going to start at a location. You're going to resolve the clue, which could be true or false, except for the 1st turn is always true. And then you're going to move and potentially confront Lanuvium. You'll do that. You'll get 5 clues, and then you'll get 4 more turns to try to capture Lanuvium before they escape and you've lost. No matter how many incorrect guesses you make, you win if you capture them by the 9th turn. If by the end of the 9th turn you haven't captured them, then you lose. So yeah, that'll do it. Thank you for hanging in to the end. I hope this was informative. I know I kind of stumbled a bit there because the deduction of these can be kind of tricky, and if you're talking aloud, I can sound a bit silly. But thanks for watching along. I hope you found this useful, and have a great day.